Back in 2008, I had lumps under my arm and in my groin area. Went to the doctor and a series of tests were run and several rounds of antibiotics, but they couldn't find anything. So my doctor suggested that I get a biopsy just to be sure. We did a biopsy, and a couple of days later, got a phone call from my doctor on Sunday morning of all days. And I just started to sweat. I just felt like, wow, something might not be right here. But I knew I stayed active. I was exercising 4 to 5 times a week. I was running, I was eating right. I was living a good life, you know, but still I knew possibly something wasn't right. Picked the phone up, and the doctor informed me that I was positive for non-Hodgkin's mantle cell lymphoma. My thoughts were, no way, not me, not me. I was the healthy guy. Upon trying to call my wife, I started sweating. I felt like somebody just hit me in the stomach. I was nauseated. I wanted to throw up, but I didn't want to clean it up. So called her. She was positive. She was calm. She told me, you know, we can do this. So right then I knew my journey had started, and that the good Lord had put me in a place that He wouldn't have put me unless He wanted me to be there. So we set an appointment up to go to the West Clinic to meet Dr. Tower. Upon meeting Dr. Tower, he confirmed that I did have mantle cell lymphoma. And he suggested that I might get a second opinion in Houston at the MD Anderson Cancer Center. Just because of the aggressiveness and the rarity of mantle cell lymphoma. We decided to do that. We went to MD Anderson a couple days later, and upon meeting Dr. Romagera, I could tell that he was proactive. He was determined that we could get this disease under control. He said I was stage 3, could be closer to stage 4, but Dr. Romagera wanted me to start the 1st of January. So I started January 7th with my first round of chemo infusion. Long story short, my last round was June 11th of 2009. I was feeling good, knowing that, wow, this was over with. He wanted to see me in a couple weeks to review all the testing that I was going to do to make sure that the treatment that we have put a game plan on had worked. Also during that time, I decided to set up an appointment with a dermatologist because I had a couple spots on my back that I just wanted to get looked at. So upon my test for the mantle cell, I also did a biopsy on my back. After meeting with Dr. Romagera, him coming into the office, he informed me that there was no signs of lymphoma. Man, what a great feeling, just knowing that joy and all the work that we did is maybe cancer-free. So leaving his office, it was just praise and thankfulness on my lips. Unfortunately, that seemed to be short-lived. Leaving Houston, heading home, about an hour outside of Houston, I got a phone call from my dermatology doctor informing me that I was positive for melanoma skin cancer. I felt like I had a helium balloon, just everything was going great, and then suddenly someone popped it and it just shriveled up. Man, what a feeling of coming from a great feeling to a low feeling. Upon getting in Memphis a couple weeks later, we set up for exploratory surgery to make sure that the melanoma hadn't gotten into my lymph nodes. That was of concern to the doctor if it had, but thankfully no signs of any spreading. So he cut it out, and surprisingly, the size of a dime got to be an 8-inch scar across my back. But again, walking out of the hospital, I was just so thankful, so happy again, knowing that the good Lord had gotten me through another. About 6 years of being cancer-free, living a life, staying active, getting down to just one time a visit to Houston. I went down December 2014 for my annual routine visit to get tested and to just make sure everything was good. Well, great news is no lymphoma, but the doctor was concerned that my blood work didn't look just quite right. So he asked me to stay an extra day to do a bone marrow biopsy just to make sure, which we did. And upon receiving the results from the bone marrow, he informed me that I was positive for myelodysplastic syndrome, MDS, a precancerous for leukemia. I knew that the good Lord just had me on a different path and a different journey that I had to take on. He sent me to the head of the MDS research area, and Dr. Garcia Monero, and upon sitting down with him, he let me know that I was a high-risk MDS patient, and that the only way for a cure was going to be a stem cell transplant through a donor. He also let me know that there was going to be, several things we had to do before a transplant could take place. Besides the insurance, we had to find a match, a donor match for you. Not even thinking, that they're all out there. Well, nobody in my family was a match. So they went through the International Donor Bank to find that match. Also during this time, I was also taking a trial drug through Dr. Garcia Monero that had to help my bone marrow because it wasn't producing to maturity red blood count, white blood count, or platelets. One day I got a phone call from MD Anderson stating that they had got several matches, and I asked how many, and they said, you have 36 matches. I asked them, is that good? And they said, it's phenomenal. It's your nurses and your doctors would just think that that's unheard of. And out of that 36, 3 were a perfect 100% match. Or again, I was just thinking, the good Lord, again, he was right there for me. 8 months it had passed, and it was time to stop my trial drug, which consisted of 5 shots in a week's time for this clinical trial. It was time to get ready for my stem cell transplant. The doctor let me know that I would be doing heavy chemotherapy upon arriving in the hospital, and then after that we would be administering the transplant. So my wife and I drove down to Houston. We knew that we were going to be there 100 days, basically 3, almost a half months. Upon arriving, prep work was done, a port was put in, and a couple of test chemo therapy infusions was put to see how I can handle the toxicity of the aggressive chemotherapy. The next day, I was admitted to the hospital, and right away they started the chemo. And it was very aggressive chemo. They were basically wiping out my immune system to get ready for my donors. After 9 days of heavy chemo, it was time for the transplant. It was September 30th when my doctor said, your donor transplant will arrive today, and that we're going to administer it as soon as it gets here. About 10 o'clock that night, they walked in ready to start my transplant. After several days of everything going good, my doctor let me know that the transplant looks like it was grafting well, doing good. So possibly, if everything went good, I might be able to get out of the hospital early, which I got out 9 days early. Still having to stay 15 minutes from the emergency room, just in case for that 75 days, I was a high probability of if anything was going to really happen, it was going to happen then. I was having to go to the hospital every day to get infusions and tests run. But those every days dwindled down to just twice a week, and a lot of in-home care. Everything was going good, and my doctor said that she was going to release me, and that was going to be 21 days earlier than I had thought. So once my doctor released me, it was 21 days earlier than they had previously said. My daughter and I drove back to Memphis, just thinking, man, this is just going to be a great Christmas, because it was just a few days before Christmas. But I hadn't let my family know that I was released yet. So once we got to Memphis, we walked into the house, turned on the music, I'll be home for Christmas. And I walked in, seeing all my family, just right before Christmas. Was the greatest Christmas present you could ever pray for.